Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age. Good evening and welcome to Smart Sustainability. It's 6:30 p.m. here in the Washington, D.C. area on this beautiful Sunday, March 8th. I'm Nicolette Davidar. Thanks for joining us as we're broadcasting live from Fairfax in Northern Virginia. Inclusion is an ongoing major conversation that touches many lives deeply. It contains an ability to completely change our collective worldview and liberate talents and potential that so far our preconceptions, social norms, understanding of what is considered normal have precluded us from tapping into. 1 in 59 people are diagnosed with autism, a different developmental ability to communicate and to interact. In the United States, the unemployment rate of adults on the autism spectrum is about 80%. When looking closer, autistic people have a strength potential that when properly used and applied can produce outcomes and impact that significantly exceed the benefits of all. So, how can we tap into this potential? What misconceptions are blocking the way to overcome a stigma that is mainly produced by fear, lack of knowledge, and our current understanding of mainstream? What are strengths of people on the spectrum? What do we need to know to better understand and collaborate with those of us who communicate and interact in a different and maybe particular way? How can we turn autism into strengths? This is what we need to talk about with these guests. I have Pamela Powers, Autism Service Program Coordinator with ServiceSource. I have Glenn Grundy, who's the General Manager of AMC Tyson's Corner, an inclusive employer. I have Mark Robinson, thriving employee of AMC Tyson's Corner. And I have Nigel Sparks, an exhibitor of the Aware Art Show, an autism awareness art show that takes place on April 2 at 6 p.m. to kick off Autism Awareness Month, hosted by ServiceSource. Welcome all four of you on Smart Sustainability. It's great to have you on.
Thank you.
ServiceSource, we have a larger employment development specialist team. We supply support to people with all disabilities, and then we have the autism team. And primarily it got started around 2014 because of, like you mentioned, the statistics with 1 in 59 children being diagnosed. They saw the need for having more opportunities for employment, with the challenges sometimes of people seeing that not necessarily seeing the strengths and seing the challenges of people. There are a couple things at ServiceSource that I particularly coordinate, which are the grants that we have. We have two primary grants. One is through Fairfax County, it's called ABLE, and the other one is an ASD grant in Arlington County. And then we also receive referring sources from DARS, the CSB, the ARC of Northern Virginia. So people have different ways of coming to us, but for the grants, yes, they could contact us directly.
Work at AMC,
Yes.
at Tyson's Corner.
Yeah.
So what's your role there?
I'm doing ushering, box office, and concession stuff, so I'm kind of covering all places on the floor. I started off just doing ushering when I went in, and then I went to the box office, and then finally concessions. So I help guests with tearing tickets, the cleaning up after the theaters after the movies, selling tickets, helping out with refunds, that kind of thing.
So you cover pretty much the whole
pretty much, yeah.
movie operation.
He's being
so
humble.
to
He's the
speak.
first focus candidate we've had that's been trained in all areas of the theater. So he's doing a wonderful job.
Wow, that's awesome. Why did you choose movie theaters? Why AMC?
Well, I've always loved movies and video games, and my dad is a big fan of the old classics. So I've seen things like Something Like It Hot and Casablanca. I've also seen even the older ones like Nosferatu and Metropolis. So I've always been big into movies. So when I was looking for jobs, I'd want to make it in video games or in movies, and then I got a job with the AMC. I'm like, that's that's good.
So it was
And,
a
yeah.
natural liking, so to speak.
Yeah, it's one of my big interests. So, why not? Go there.
We're going to talk a little bit about this as we go along, because I am curious to learn, how did you identify AMC? How did you kind of distill it down that this is really your passion? And so you love art.
Yes,
Right?
I do.
And you are, I guess we can call you an artist and participant of the Aware Art
Yes.
Show, right?
Yes.
So we're going to show some paintings in a moment, but why do you participate at the art show? What do you like about it?
Well, the thing I like about the Aware Art Show is that it's really, giving me a chance to display my talent to a broad group of people and gain some exposure. And I feel like Aware is a great way for Service Source to build an inclusive community for people with autism, and for them to see what other people are communicating through their work. And also, I've been intrigued by some of the other art pieces.
How did you find out that you like art? How did you find out that you had a special gift?
Well, I started drawing in high school, and I've been doing it for about 8 years. And in my junior year of high school, I started my first high school art class, and through the class, I was required to submit a portfolio. I mean, it wasn't professional quality work, but it was a good start to where I can excel myself. And through the art class, I really, learned a lot to improve my abilities. And I took, classes throughout, college and high school to, improve my craft to the point where I'm passionate about it. And this is something, I want to do for the rest of my life.
Actually, we have two of Nigel's art, which we can probably show to our viewers. We have two pieces. They're not coming up right now. There they are. So we have a tractor. It's a John, you can see it up there. It's a John Deere tractor, but what is special, and viewers see it on the camera. So I was really intrigued because when I saw this first, I thought it was a print, but you said you've started it from scratch.
Yeah, see, the thing is, this is a print of a graphite drawing I did for my uncle Reggie, and this is his tractor that he really liked so much, and I drew that in graphite for him. And the hubcaps were from another picture, not the original reference photo I used of the actual tractor I drew. And I took the hubcaps from the other picture and put them on there to give it the illusion like they were part of the same picture when they're really not.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
It is absolutely amazing. I think most people, when they saw it, you'd think it's a photograph, and it's all painted.
sure.
It's really amazing.
Thank you.
That's what, when I saw this, I was like, how did you find out that you were so gifted in art? And then we also want to take a look at the other one, because you brought a second piece,
Yes.
and which you called Creative Atmosphere, I
Yes.
believe. There we go. Can you talk a little bit about this one?
Well, this one was done for another one of my college art classes. Was done with whiteout, ink, acrylic paint, and colored pencil on a sheet of cardboard. And with this one, what I really wanted to do was try something I haven't done before. And this was my first time using acrylic paint. I wanted to create, an abstract scenery that really, allows me to, express my creativity and relax and, think outside the box.
Yeah, so do you find it relaxing when you do that?
Yes, I do. That's why I called it Creative Atmosphere.
Yeah. So when you say you think outside the box, when you look at this painting, so you literally express kind of like what you're envisioning internally?
Yes. And kind of, make it up, I kind of, made it up as I went along.
There's a lot of talent and a lot of strength, which brings me right to you, Glenn.
Tough to follow that.
Yeah, it's tough to follow. That is true. But talk to us a little bit. So you're general manager at
I am.
AMC Tyson's Corner, and you want to give us, just for our viewers who may be new to the area, talk a little bit about AMC Tyson's?
Sure. AMC Tyson's in McLean, Virginia. Been with AMC 25 years. Started back when the original Lion King came out, my first day on the job. So Very large
You're part of
theater.
the inventory then.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge theater out there. We do about 1.1 million guests a year, so that gives you an idea of what type of situation Mark is dealing with on a daily basis. When we
Yes.
talk about face-to-face with people and some of the skills that he's learning on a day-to-day basis. It's currently the 12th busiest theater in the United States of America. So that's,
Why have you decided to be an inclusive employer?
I think I've always been part of that. I've always done that. It starts, I think, when you're little and your mom and dad and sister are all doing the right things and accepting people for who they are. I think it's about letting people have opportunities. And AMC is a environment that creates respect and integrity and diversity and community involvement. All those things are huge in what we do on a daily basis. So I really think it's about just giving them the opportunities to see what they can do. We just saw what Nigel
Absolutely.
can do.
Hold that thought. We're going to go right back in. When we come back after the break, we're going to keep talking about how we can bring out the strength in autism. Can you clarify for us what it means to be on the spectrum?
So, well, the spectrum is just that. It's a large range of common characteristics of ranging, and we kind of look at it from the standpoint of people with all abilities. So it basically tells us how much support somebody needs.
What are the major strengths? Because I did some research on that too, and so obviously people on the spectrum have like inherently strong strengths or a very strong set of skills or strengths in certain areas depending on where their interests are. So I know some of them excel in math outstandingly, or in science, or in art, which we've just seen, or in music or things like that. Can you talk to that a little bit?
So from a job coach perspective, it's a lot of the things that we see with people that are on the autism spectrum, that they tend to be, first of all, they're really grateful that they get a job, so they tend to be punctual. When they have a job, often we'll hear employers say, you know, can you just get them to take a break? Because, you know, legally they need to, because they're such hard workers. The majority of people that we have that work on the spectrum also very honest.
How do you work with clients to find out where their skill sets or where their strengths are?
So if they've never been employed before, we will start typically with situational assessments, and we'll take them out where they can do job tryouts at different businesses in the community, and we look for certain things like how their stamina is or how they interact with other people, or and so we always look at it from a perspective of like what are their absolute strengths right out of the gate, and what can we do to support them to gain the others. So like, for example, we have soft skills groups at ServiceSource, and so we'll work on some of those soft skills, because typically they have, most people have hard skills, and that they can get the job with the hard skills, but it's really working on the soft skills that help them with nonverbal communication, professionalism, interviewing tip.
Considering that there are kind of like splinter skills and certain major skills in certain areas. I mean, when you know, for example, like Nigel, when you have someone who is extremely gifted in arts, for example, it's kind of, I guess, it makes a lot of sense to understand that then if you have someone who has such a passion for something, that there may be a tendency to almost like over-deliver because you love what you do, right? You don't stop in a way.
Yes.
Did you experience that?
And some people, yeah, we do experience that where they're very just so, and I think Mark's an example of that, because, you know, when he first came in and did assessments, and you can speak a little bit more to that, but I think it was kind of like, because the majority of, so what we do is we never want to put somebody into a job. That's not the goal. The goal is to figure out what they like, what their passions are, and find them something that they're going to enjoy being at, you know.
Did you have an idea when you went there already, kind of like what you liked?
I knew going in that I loved, you know, anime, video games, movies, books, manga. So essentially,
So did you tell them, like, when you came in,
Yeah,
and said, this is what I like?
I mean, I was.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Like I had another individual who was adamant that he wanted to work in a library. It's because of the choir environment, he liked that. And the more I talked to him, I realized he loved the movies. It was something that actually brought him alive. And so I did an assessment at a movie theater in the community, and he loved it. So I was like,
Absolutely. And then I guess you go out on the strength. Now I do have, what are kind of like some of the differences in terms of interacting? And I don't know if either one of you wants to answer that, or one of you, like, what are main differences in terms of communication, or do you have a certain style that you think differs from someone else's? or not?
I'm not really good at showing how other people do that kind of thing, but for me, I think like the bit more wanting to be open, but more resolved. Like that's the inability to really act upon kind of stuff, and it's really good when people kind of are able to more or less kind of understand that just because you're not doing something or not saying something doesn't mean that you don't feel that way.
Okay.
Because it's hard to sometimes express in a meaningful way what you're trying to say, and it's still for everyone, but it's kind of hard when you can't pick up on how other people are responding to what you're doing. So it's kind of figuring out the balance there. And
So how do you balance this? So you work in the movie, sort of in the movie industry, and we heard it's one of the largest ones, revenue-wise, et cetera, like in the U.S.
Well, and that's huge from a communication standpoint,
Yeah.
because that's helped him so much just as a key person on the ticket drop or interacting on a daily basis with sometimes thousands of people.
Yeah.
And being upfront in his communication skills, I think, have enhanced greatly since you've been there. And something that Mark used to say was maybe something he wasn't strong at. He's now been out public speaking with me multiple times. He's on television with you today.
That's right.
He's doing things that would be considered a huge fear for some people, and he's facing those challenges on a daily basis. And I think the amount of guests he's interacting and connecting with are hugely beneficial to him and to us, because he does such a good job with guests and getting them to come back and selling AMC Stubbs programs, because he's talking to them and engaging them, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now let me ask you, did you work on that to overcome that, or was it never an issue?
I mean, for crowds especially, I've always been really bad at that. I've gotten better with it, obviously. But like when I was younger, multiple times, there were times when I had literally broke down in the middle of crowds.
Right.
Like to the point where I don't remember the time what happened at all. So like just the idea of, when I first went in, the idea of walking with, thousands of people was kind of scary. But like we had Avengers recently, and that we had lines that were like literally past where we could see in the mall.
Yeah,
and it was obviously a lot, but it wasn't overwhelming. I think for me at least, working at the movie theater and having wearing the short, having a name tag, kind of makes me feel more like I'm part of the group, and I have more or less kind of a position in a conversation, which has helped me overcome that. And it's also helped outside of it because now that I'm used to big groups.
Yeah, obviously.
With Avengers, we had like 3,000 or 4,000 over the course of like 4 hours.
Yeah, so you sound like very excited about your work. So
Yeah.
ask you, Nigel, when you discovered that you had a gift in painting, I guess you said you discovered it early on. Were you nervous at first when you kind of decided this is what you want to do for the rest of your life?
No, not really, because I feel like I had the confidence that I can be great if I just, put my mind to it and work hard at it consistently.
Because there's also an aspect to it. So you do art. There's a lot of love that goes into it, so to speak. And then when you have a piece of art, you have the selling aspect. So there's also a direct interaction with people, and apparently, so how do you feel about that?
Well, I feel I would be comfortable enough to do it if I had to, like at an art show, because I was in one recently at my school, and I feel like it was pretty easy to interact with people, and the customers were nice.
Did you notice that you get more confident the more paintings you do, or does that kind of come with depending on? Is that different with each of the artworks?
I feel like I get more and more confident on each one I do, because the better I get, the more I'm not as nervous or worried about how I'm gonna do. I mean, there are times where I get stressful where something doesn't go the way I want to, and I'm nervous on how I'm gonna resolve it. But I eventually resolve it, and I can pick myself back up to get to where I need to go with the work.
Here we have approximately 20 participants that will be in the art show, including all different mediums, and also including, we have 2 musicians this year. One will be playing the piano for part of it. We have a local artist that sings, and so he will be singing one of his original or
And
two.
those are all people who are on the spectrum,
Yes,
right?
so everybody in the art show is on the autism spectrum.
Welcome back to Smart Sustainability. I'm Nicolette Devidar, and tonight we talk about inclusive employment and how to tap or turn autism into strength. You've participated 3 years in a row, ever since the beginning. So why is that art show particularly so important?
Well, the reason why I think it's important is because it has really allowed me to gain exposure, and I feel like it's a good way for developing artists to really build their art repertoire and be exposed to the talent that's around them and see how their skills compare to other people. And I'd like to thank ServiceSource for allowing me to participate in a community-driven program that's very, well known.
So do you know most of the artists that participate there?
Oh, I don't know most of them. I've heard of some of their names. I've met some of them, but I don't know most of them though. Display, 2 of them. So in the first one I displayed 2, and in the second one I displayed 2, and this one I'm displaying 2, but copies of them, multiple copies of them, of the artwork.
So tell them about how you created it, what your vision was.
Yes. Like the media and what I used and everything.
Your impression, like how this has developed over the last 3 years?
I feel like it's really, allowed me to, get my name there, and it's a good way for me to, really sell my work and meet other people on the autism spectrum who are, as talented, who have the same interests as me, and I really like to see what they produce at the show.
Do you think this show helps particularly artists that participate to really bring out their skills? Can they refine their skills?
Maybe not so refined, but maybe get inspiration for other pieces they might want to do in the future.
To do some talking things for them.
Awesome. So you're really excelling in the communications part.
Yeah.
Which brings me back actually to both of you. So it sounds like, do you feel that the art show has grown your confidence over the years?
In a way, I feel like it has. I feel like I can, produce high quality work that a lot of enthusiasts could appreciate and value.
You had training. You said he got training like in all areas within AMC.
Yep, so there's a lot of different things that happen. We have our focus program, which actually stands for Fostering Opportunities and Cultivating Untapped Strengths, which is exactly what we're
Is this
talking
open
about
for
today.
all of the employees,
So
or is this like a specialty
It's
program?
typically for a situation like
Okay.
Mark, who would come in with a job coach. We work with a lot of different organizations, Best Buddies, Choice Group.
Yeah.
Obviously, ServiceSource is the one we work most closely with. So typically, a candidate would come in and we do what we call a walking interview. So we don't do on the job, they don't work, but they do a walking interview for probably about a half an hour where we walk through. I think the interview is where people are most stressed, right? We're all nervous today. It's a hard thing to sit down and be asked questions and know what those answers are. And I think a lot of people don't get to even see what these people are capable of because they don't give them those opportunities. So the walking interview kind of takes that first barrier away. It gives them some comfort because maybe Pamela's with him or her, and she's let them know what they're going to expect. And we just walk through different areas of the theater. You're going to be doing this. Is that something you think you would like? Is that something you think you can do? And it's about focusing on what you can do. And of course, we could get into, we make small, minor accommodations. Does somebody need to sit in a chair? Does somebody need a schedule printed out? Does Pamela need to come in and help somebody with an online class? There's such basic, easy accommodations once we get them into the program. But I think you're seeing unbelievable talents here, right? That are being missed by so many people. We have 8 people alone at the theater out of 36 employees that are part of this program. So not to get into numbers, but that's over 20% of our crew that is part of the focus program, and many of them with extended tenure. Mark's going on 3 years. We have 2 or 3 others, 2 or 3 years in, and we have an incredible story of one girl that's been with us. Lauren's behind me here, and Pamela's nodding her head for 11 and a half years, and is living on her own with her cat, and helps take care of her brother, and does just amazing things. And since she's been with us at AMC, that she's achieved on her own. It's incredible.
So with 20% of your employees having are they all on the spectrum background, or are there different?
The exact definition of the spectrum, right? Everybody's at different levels and has different success rates. We typically start everybody as an usher, like Mark explain, and that's why I wanted to highlight that, because he's really achieved some phenomenal things, getting trained in different areas and doing sales and math on register and all those different things that he's turned out to be excellent at. And I think that's what this program is all about. They are finding out that they have talents that they may not even know. I found time and time again that what we see today is true. Every candidate I have is strong at something, be that movie memorization or art or music or whatever it is we're talking about. But they are learning every day that they have more talents than they realized when they first got there, and Mark's a great example of that. So them are dealing with the public and communicating and enforcing policies, which can be hard and challenging.
Can be very hard.
Telling someone they can't come in without an ID, or you can't bring food into the theater, and they have to do those things all the time.
Oh yeah.
So can you give us an example, like when you were in a situation where you had to talk to someone about this?
There are lots of times when people bring in food, especially Tyson's AMC, because we're right next to the mall food court.
Yeah.
So people bring things, Five Guys, California Tortilla, or they bring stuff from the restaurants downstairs, because it's a huge mall complex.
Right.
And so I just say something like, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, you can't bring in that food. Most of the time, people are like, okay, so I can hold it, or just just toss it in the trash, which is right next to where it is.
Yeah.
There are times though when people are like, why can't I bring my food? It's just leftovers. I'm not going to eat it. And it's like, even if you're not going to eat it, it's still
bringing it in, yes. Yeah. But do they get training? Did you get a training in terms of how you would convey those messages? Which can be challenging even if you're not on the spectrum.
Not really much you can do in terms of training for that. You can give people tips and hints on how to deal with it.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be those people who just won't listen to that. So really it's just, do your best. And we have this thing, we tell everyone new, and they told me too, if you're all having trouble, you can always just send it up.
So the Focus program, is this something that all AMCs?
Yeah, this is a nationwide program through AMC theaters. Every theater obviously participates at a different level, but it's something AMC is very passionate about. Again, very diverse clientele, and happy to give everybody an opportunity. Really just about doing the right thing and seeing what people can do.
I want to get back to what you said about the initial interview process, because I think this is something that we should talk about, which really sounds like a great way of kind of seeing what resonates with a candidate in terms of when you walk them through and you see, is this something you would like to do or not? How open, from your experience, are candidates to usually be able to tell you sort of on the spot, yeah, I can see that, I like that, or is there someone who actually says, no, I don't want to do this?
I think that's one of the traits of this program, and when we're talking about people on the spectrum, I find it is very honest and very direct, and to be funny, if they didn't want to do something, I think they would tell me, no, I don't want to do that, and I think we get a very good perception of what they're capable of just in that walkthrough. I think it's a loose and it's a relaxed atmosphere. And
normally bring, how many candidates do you normally bring on a certain interview or for a certain opening?
Oh, so our services are one-on-one.
Okay.
So if we were to set up, and like Glenn mentioned, we wouldn't bring somebody to AMC that wasn't interested in movies, because we're not going to try to.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not about getting a job; it's about finding something that really highlights their
Mm-hmm.
strengths and is a good match. So
let's talk very briefly about some of the traits the things that kind of are important to remember, and we're going to have to be quick because we're going to go almost into the next break.
Okay.
So obviously the communication, I think we talked a little bit about that. What are other traits? Now you said they're very straightforward.
I think very straightforward, yes, definitely. Very detail oriented. If you tell somebody this is what we're doing, they're not going to waver. My perception of that is they're going to follow that to the letter, which can be a challenge sometimes, because we just talked about situations where Mark has to make decisions based on one-on-one encounters and what's happening. But we typically find that to be a strength. A rule follower, somebody that's turning in nickels to the lost and found because that's the right thing to do.
I really want to talk about how do we make employment a success? But before we leap into this, I think we have to clarify an important point. And this, for me personally, I think this is really important, because when we talk about people on the spectrum, we always think there is the norm of people not being on the spectrum, and then there's people on the spectrum. But in reality, we're all different and we're all unique, and you can't really, just because someone is different doesn't make it not normal. And then the other question is, how healthy is normal actually? So can you talk to that a little bit about?
So I think the main thing is that everybody just wants to be accepted for who they are.
Yep.
And I think as a culture, we need to move toward focusing on each other's strengths. We all learn differently.
Everyone learns differently.
Yes, correctly.
Everyone has a different style of working.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a different communication style.
Right.
So are there some major things that people in organizations, and I think this applies to organizations, no matter what the organization is, that kind of says, how do we deal with people who communicate differently? Are there some things that we kind of need to be aware to understand each other?
Right. I think that that these gentlemen are a great example of working through on their communication, but we often do see people on the autism spectrum that do not have the communication skills. A lot of times because the sensory input is so great that they have a hard time formulating their thoughts.
So how would that come across? So what does it mean in practical
So there are a
matters
couple
when
different-
someone talks to someone like that, for example?
So a couple times, it will come across sometimes as they will just kind of not respond. Sometimes it comes across very robotic, where their voice is very broken. And the biggest thing that I feel with working with people on the autism spectrum is really to be direct, concise, and a lot of times I think we tend to put way too many words into something and just kind of keeping it as direct as possible. I mean, we try to use that as job coaches because so the meaning doesn't get lost and like.
But that sounds to me like this is actually good advice for everyone in the
Without a doubt.
communication
Yes.
style.
Right.
That extra layer out that kind of takes people into leaving room for interpretation rather than being very direct and say we mean what we say and we say what we mean.
Correct.
Right, exactly.
What would you say to people, other employees, for example, to interact with people who have been on the spectrum, who have maybe a little bit more issues in terms of communicating? Because you seem to be a very natural,
Yeah, Mark is a wonderful example. I think
Yes.
I think we have to adapt ourselves a little bit to the style and react to, as Pamela just said, there's different ways that work for everybody. That's true of every employee, so I don't really view that the focus candidates again are different than anybody else. We're constantly adapting our style. Something works to motivate you, something works to motivate
Right.
Nigel, something works to motivate Mark. So we have to be understanding of the fact that their way of doing something may be a little different, or their way of saying it may be a little bit different, but it's really us that needs to adapt and be a little more open to what's going on in the world and the fact that they're not doing it wrong, maybe trying to see it more from their perspective.
So, like the way, some autistic people communicate is different than, someone who isn't autistic. And, I feel like, how do I explain it? I feel like the people who aren't autistic should understand, it's not, a curse that someone can't, talk as fluently as, someone else. It's just, how they were born.
Yeah. You want to add something to that also,
Yeah, like
from your perspective?
yeah, I agree with what Nigel was saying. It's not that people on the spectrum don't know what they're saying or don't understand what you're saying. You just have to kind of be willing to walk with them a bit. And because sometimes it takes a bit longer for us to get things out. Because we know what we want to say, we know what you're saying, but sometimes there's that kind of disconnect where it kind of gets lost a lot easier. I mean, there's always something lost in talking, but it's kind of, stuff falls through the gaps fall easier, and just be able to walk with that and willing to walk with that and kind of put a little extra effort into really getting points across and to listening to what the people are saying so you can understand what their point is.
So what I've learned so far, and that's actually a very important point that you just said, I was going to say that gives everyone an opportunity to really refine listening skills, which also I think is something that overall collectively is extremely important to do. So from all what I'm hearing is that really sounds to me like it's totally beneficial for everyone. So A, clearer communication, and then B, sharpening the listening skills, correct?
One other thing I'm thinking of is, in my experience, autism is very routine based. So I want to know when my break is, I want to know when this starts, I want to know what I do next. And conversation is not routine based when you're talking about how people communicate. It's not a locked in routine. It's going to be fluent like this is. And if you're on the spectrum, you don't know what's coming next. You don't know what that next interaction is. And that in and of itself is a challenge for someone with autism. So that's where the understanding or maybe looking at it or being empathetic and trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand, as Mark said or Nigel said, what they're thinking or how they're viewing it is so important. But conversation does take you out of the normal routine. It's hard to ad lib when you're so comfortable with doing it a certain way.
With anybody that we're working with, I think we've, especially in this area, we're so used to just rush, and we want quick answers. And it really just, if you would, in my opinion, like be patient and have empathy,
Right.
and know that every person, whether they're on the autism spectrum or not, wants to be accepted for who they are as an individual, and give that person the same respect that you would anybody else.
That's right. And empathy and patience, listening skills, communication skills, those are all skills we desperately need for the 21st century, even in an agile world of operating. Talk a little bit about the business impact. So from your experience, I mean, you have 20% employees that are in that spectrum. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits for employing people on the spectrum?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's a morale increaser. I think I work with teenagers that have never experienced anything except the acceptance of everyone every day, and hopefully they'll bring that to their businesses someday down the road. I think it helps us be inclusive and respected in the community. It gives us opportunities such as the one today to talk to other employers. I've been out many times speaking to employers about how beneficial this can be. You're looking at employees that like their job, they're happy to go to work. I come into work and people are happy to see their boss because I'm the guy that gave them a chance. I'm the person that gave them an opportunity. So wouldn't you like to have an entire staff of people that love their job, love movies, want to be at work, want to say hi to you, want to see you, and are just happy to be there and prove you right, which is my favorite thing to say. Prove me correct that I made a decision to give them an opportunity that so many other people maybe didn't. Most of our candidates haven't worked full-time jobs. And if I could say so, the fact that Mark was not working prior is surprising to me. Look at what Mark has to offer.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what people are missing out on. So having individuals like Mark on the team are hugely impactful and beneficial to us.
I do want to dispel some of the myths, like what holds organizations back or people back from employing more people? Like what do people with autism run into as primary issues?
I think even at things like this, the biggest problem is everybody talks about what are the barriers. We shouldn't be talking about what the barriers are. We should be talking about why we can do it, which is it's very easy to do and to give those people opportunities. But I think the accommodations are exaggerated, or what needs to happen to
we heard
have
from you,
somebody
they're
work there.
basically not.
Oh, I got to bring a chair. That's so
You
difficult.
need to match the skills to what someone
Right.
does. Exactly.
There's concerns about legalities, I think, at times, legal issues or problems that are going to happen if somebody can't perform the job. But again, if your expectations are clear and you're doing
And if it's a
things
good
like we
skill
do,
match to begin with,
correct,
then this
then
is not,
it
shouldn't be an issue.
I've had
at
all those issues with every
Everyone else.
employee I could ever hire. I could have those exact same issues. So there's just a mindset that needs to change, and we really got to get past the barrier portion of that. I had somebody say to me,
Communication, which really is, once we focus on this would help everyone. The listening, which would help everyone. We talked about, you said they're also very detailed oriented, which is also something that's like really right on the mark. Are there some other myths you want to talk about where we have a wrong perception that simply is not correct?
Well, I think a lot of people, they relate to what they've maybe seen on TV, so they automatically think of like Dustin Hoffman in The Rain Man, or they think of other roles that they've seen on television. And I think the biggest thing that we love to say is, like, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Because it is we all have diverse capabilities and qualities. So that's one of the biggest myths of like, every individual is different. And
do you think that the more we talk about it, so we can take down the fear a little bit? Because I think there's just this general discomfort among people that if you're afraid of something, it's just a little hard. So if you had to give an advice to a fellow employer, what would that be? We have to make it quick.
I think they don't realize what they can achieve. Bring out the best in other people and just take a chance and give somebody an opportunity. You're going to be shocked at what they have to offer you, and they're going to be surprised as well.
And I like to add, not just in the work environment, but also in personal relationships. I think there's a myth that people on the autism spectrum don't want the same social
which
outings
is
as we
not
do.
true.
It's
Well,
just not
thank
true.
you very much. This was a very, very informative round. Thank you so much for watching. We're already at the end of the show. We hope you